I briskly walked into the spacious living room of our luxurious penthouse apartment, briefcase in hand, feeling content after a successful business meeting. The panoramic view of the New York City skyline greeted me, as it did every evening when I returned home. However, something felt amiss today. An unfamiliar presence lingered in the air, a subtle yet persistent feeling that disrupted the usual serenity of our abode. "Elizabeth, darling, are you home?" I called out, setting my belongings down on the marble-topped coffee table. Silence. Furrowing my brow, I made my way toward our bedroom, my footsteps echoing against the hardwood floors. As I approached, the muffled sound of voices caught my attention, causing my heart to skip a beat. Cautiously, I pressed my ear against the door, straining to make sense of the hushed tones emanating from within. That's when I heard it, a deep, masculine voice that certainly did not belong to me. A surge of adrenaline coursed through my veins as I burst through the door, unprepared for the sight that awaited me. There, tangled in our silk sheets, was my wife, Elizabeth, her porcelain skin glistening with perspiration, locked in a passionate embrace with a man I recognized as her personal trainer, Mark. Time seemed to freeze as our eyes met, a mixture of shock, guilt, and fear plastered across their faces. The air became thick with tension, each second stretching into an eternity of deafening silence. "Richard, Elizabeth's voice trembled, her eyes welling with tears. "It's not what it looks like." But it was precisely what it looked like, and we all knew it. Anger, betrayal, and heartbreak swirled within me, forming a toxic cocktail of emotions that threatened to consume me whole. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat, choked by the overwhelming sense of devastation. Without uttering a word, I turned on my heel and stormed out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, and into the bustling streets of New York City. My mind raced, desperately seeking solace in the chaos that surrounded me. How could she do this to me? To us? After everything we had built together, after the countless sacrifices and compromises, she had thrown it all away for a fleeting moment of pleasure. As I wandered aimlessly, the weight of Elizabeth's betrayal bore down upon me, crushing me beneath its immense burden. I had given her everything, my love, my trust, my devotion, and she had repaid me with deceit. In that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The life I had carefully constructed, the future I had envisioned with the woman I loved, had crumbled to dust before my very eyes. And so, with a heavy heart and a shattered soul, I made a silent vow to myself, a vow to seek justice, to exact revenge upon those who had wronged me so grievously. For in the depths of my despair, a newfound determination took root, fueled by the fire of betrayal and the desire for retribution. The path ahead would be long and arduous, but I was resolute in my conviction. Mark and Elizabeth would soon learn that their actions had consequences, and I would be the one to deliver them. The weeks that followed were a blur of intense planning and meticulous execution. With each passing day, the wounds inflicted by Elizabeth's betrayal festered, fueling an insatiable thirst for vengeance that consumed my every waking thought. I knew that to truly make them suffer, I needed to strike at the core of what they valued most, their wealth and reputation. It was a calculated risk, one that could potentially backfire if not executed with precision, but I was willing to gamble everything to see them brought to their knees. The first step was to cut off Elizabeth's access to my wealth. I called an emergency meeting with my lawyers and financial advisors, instructing them to freeze all joint accounts and initiate the process of liquidating our shared assets. "Richard, are you sure about this?" my longtime friend and advisor, Jackson, asked with concern etched across his face. "This is a drastic measure." "I've never been more certain about anything in my life," I replied, my jaw clenched with determination. "That woman has betrayed me in the worst possible way. She doesn't deserve a penny of what we've built together." Without further protest, Jackson nodded solemnly and set the wheels in motion. The following day, I summoned Elizabeth to the living room, where I had once envisioned us growing old together, surrounded by the warmth of our love and the fruits of our labor. "Elizabeth," I began, my voice laced with barely contained contempt, I trust you've realized by now that your access to our accounts has been restricted. Her eyes widened in shock, her perfectly manicured hands trembling as the realization dawned upon her. Richard, please, let me explain. Save your breath. I cut her off sharply. You've made your choice, and now you must live with the consequences. But where will I go? She pleaded, tears streaming down her porcelain cheeks. What will I do? That's no longer my concern, I replied coldly, turning my back on her and walking away, leaving her to wallow in the misery of her own making. With Elizabeth's financial ruin set in motion, I shifted my focus to Mark, the man who had so brazenly violated the sanctity of my marriage. Using my extensive network of connections, I made a few discreet inquiries and learned that he was employed as a personal trainer at one of the most prestigious gyms in the city. It didn't take long for me to orchestrate his downfall. A few well-placed rumors about his unprofessional conduct and questionable ethics began to circulate, quickly gaining traction within the fitness community. Before long, the gym had no choice but to terminate his employment, citing a breach of their strict code of conduct. But I wasn't satisfied with merely taking away his job. No, I wanted to ensure that Mark would never find gainful employment in this city again, a constant reminder of the price he had paid for his indiscretions. Through a series of strategic leaks and carefully curated whisper campaigns, I painted Mark as a predatory and untrustworthy individual, someone no reputable establishment would dare associate with. It was a masterful display of manipulation, one that would have far-reaching consequences for the man who had so callously torn my world apart. As the weeks progressed, reports of Mark's desperate job searches and financial struggles began to surface, filling me with a twisted sense of satisfaction. He was getting a taste of the anguish he had inflicted upon me, a mere appetizer for the main course of retribution I had planned. Elizabeth, too, was starting to feel the weight of her actions. With her lavish lifestyle reduced to a mere memory, she found herself struggling to make ends meet, a far cry from the opulence she had grown accustomed to. One evening, as I was reviewing the latest surveillance footage from the security system I had installed in our former home, I witnessed a scene that both enraged and amused me. Elizabeth, clad in a tattered robe, her once immaculate appearance now a shadow of its former glory, was pleading with Mark for financial assistance. "Please, Mark," she begged, her pride long since abandoned. "I have nowhere else to turn. Richard has taken everything from me." Mark, however, seemed equally destitute, his arrogant swagger replaced by a dejected slump. "I'm sorry, Elizabeth," he replied, his voice laced with defeat. "I have nothing left to give." Watching their pathetic display, I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. They had brought this upon themselves, and now they were reaping the bitter fruits of their betrayal. But my revenge was far from complete. No, I had one final act in store, a coup de grace that would cement their ruination and ensure that they would never be able to escape the consequences of their actions. Little did they know, the security footage I had captured of their illicit tryst was about to become public knowledge, a permanent stain on their reputations that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. With a few keystrokes, I set the plan in motion, uploading the incriminating footage to various online platforms, ensuring that it would go viral within hours. The reactions were swift and merciless, with a tidal wave of condemnation and mockery raining down upon the disgraced couple. Their names became synonymous with infidelity and deceit, their once pristine reputations reduced to ashes in the court of public opinion. Employers, friends, and even family members distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with such a scandalous affair. As I watched their lives unravel before my very eyes, a sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. Justice had been served, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Elizabeth, now a mere shell of her former self, attempted to reach out to me one final time, her voice trembling with desperation. "Richard, please, I'm begging you," she sobbed over the phone. "I made a terrible mistake, but I still love you. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive me?" I remained silent for a moment, letting the weight of her words hang in the air before delivering my final verdict. "Love?" I scoffed. "You know nothing of love. You threw it away the moment you betrayed me with that worthless personal trainer. Now, you must live with the consequences of your actions." As for forgiveness, you forfeited that privilege the day you broke my heart. With those words, I ended the call, severing the last remaining tie to the woman who had once been my world. As I sat alone in the dimly lit room, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had once been so full of promise, I couldn't help but wonder if the price of vengeance had been too high. But as the memories of Elizabeth's betrayal flooded back, any lingering doubts were swiftly extinguished. They had chosen their path, and I had merely ushered them down it with a firm hand. The web of deception they had woven had ensnared them, and now they were left to untangle the consequences, one agonizing thread at a time. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.